I saw the chest explode on the nearest figure, a tall, emaciated creature with bloody red eyes. The film of blood seemed about to overflow and fall down his face as tears, but it never did. The eyes of the others looked the same, and in the beams of the overly bright LED flashlights, they almost seemed to glow and shimmer. I could see the vague silhouette of pupils beneath the blood. Though this happened years ago, I still remember the way they looked, the superhuman speed of these abominations, the flakes that fell off their crisp, destroyed skin in the pale moonlight, and the much brighter lights of our flashlight beams. Their emaciated, scorched bodies moved in a blur, surrounding and rushing us. The gunshots broke the stillness of the woods, and everything seemed to devolve into chaos within seconds. In the moment, I felt a wave of calmness come over me. I could see us being surrounded, see the rounds taking down the first line of blackened creatures, but I felt at peace. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. I aimed the shotgun again and again at center mass, blowing apart their chest and stomachs with shotgun slugs, and none of them rose. Blue blood spurted from their wounds. It had the hue of a dark Arctic ocean, frozen and endless. The dark blue fluid soaked into their burnt skin as they lay on the ground, gasping and dying, clenching and unclenching their twisted fingers with endless gurgling screams. But we were 5 against many, hopelessly outnumbered. Whatever these things were, they seemed to have no fear. They kept coming, running at use, and I had to reload. With practiced ease, my fingers yanked slugs from my bulging pockets, slamming them into the shotgun. Most of the other rangers had also run out of ammo. I saw a couple dozen blackened bodies laying across the trail in the forest, some of them dead, others dying or seizing, kicking their strangely long and crooked feet again and again, like a child throwing a tantrum. Soon, they had started to reach us, and I saw them grab Antonio, heaving his massive body across the trail and throwing him to the ground. Others saw the opportunity and leapt towards him, their fangs gleaming in the artificial light. They began to bite at his face and neck. "Get away from him!" I screamed, slamming the last slug into the gun and running forwards. I began firing, but in my excitement, the first shot went high and blew apart a tree, sending chunks of bark and splinters in every direction. The next one hit the creature that bent over Antonio's neck, entering the back of its head and continuing down towards the forest floor. The shot missed Antonio himself by only a foot or so, but it had to be done. I had no better angle to fire from at the time. The creature fell over Antonio, but another one bent over his chest, and I saw with horror that he had bitten a chunk from Antonio's shoulder and now sucked out the spurting blood, sighing in pleasure and grinning. It looked up at me for a moment, blood staining its teeth red, its liquid eyes emanating hatred and hunger towards me. I shot it in the neck, and the blue blood of its body mixed with the red of its feast, giving a technicolor hue to the life fluids that leaked out of its broken, dying body. I kicked the creatures off of Antonio. They felt surprisingly light, like lifting the body of a child. Though they were taller than any man in our group, their emaciated bodies didn't seem to have an ounce of fat, as if they had been starved for weeks, and then released to feed on whatever they found. The last ranger in our group, a new and very young-looking man by the name of Roger, ran past, shooting at something in the forest, hollering and laughing. I registered it for a moment, then a scream took me back to the present. Dean shrieked at me, "Behind you!" I spun, finding 3 more of the creatures standing there, blue saliva foaming from their mouths. Their sharp teeth gnashed at the air, tasting the meat that stood in front of them before it had even entered their mouth. And they rushed at me at once. I fired 3 times and hit 2 of them in the head. The third shot went high, and then the creature was on me, knocking me to the ground. I knew I had no more shells in my shotgun by this point, having fired all 6 rounds. I held onto the shotgun and tried to use it as a weapon. Turning it sideways, I used it like a club, forcing it against the creature's thin, long neck. Its head came down towards my face, snapping and breathing rotten fumes into my mouth. I tasted its saliva as it dripped down onto my lips, a taste like rancid meat and chemicals. I spat, pushing with all my strength, but it continued to get closer, until its face, and its many sharp fangs, stood only a fraction of an inch from my own. We looked into each other's eyes, like infatuated lovers. But I knew the only thing this creature loved in me was my flesh, which it would rip apart as I lay there, screaming and pleading for death. As my strength failed and the creature's face lunged forward, opening its maw wide, its head exploded, sending a waterfall of cerulean blood pouring down over my mouth and nose. I felt pieces of its skin stuck to mine, and soon I held only a lifeless corpse by the neck with my shotgun. Spitting and retching, I rolled to my side, wiping my eyes with my jacket sleeve. I looked up and saw Dean standing there, a black 30-06 Remington in his hands. He smiled at me and gave me his hand. "God damn," I said, spitting on the ground and nearly throwing up as I tasted the blood at the back of my throat. "I guess you could have waited longer, Dean." He shrugged. "They're gone," he said, showing me the bodies of a few dozen blackened monstrosities laying on the ground. The rest of them fled into the woods. I doubt that's the last we will see of them, though, and I would have shot it sooner. But Allie had one on her back. Literally, it jumped on her like it wanted a piggyback ride, and it bit into her shoulder and sucked some of her blood. I took that one out and yours as quickly as I could. Then I remembered Antonio. "Where's Antonio?" I asked, goosebumps rising on my skin. "Is he—" "He's still alive," Dean said, his smile fading. He pointed to Antonio on the ground. Allie stood by his side, applying pressure to the gaping wound on his shoulder. I could see pieces of his bone through it. His right ear was gone, and he had blood pouring from a scalp wound. He breathed fast, raising and lowering his arms and calling out for his wife. Allie calmed him. "We're getting you help," she said. "You're going to be okay. It doesn't look like any major blood vessels got severed, thank God." "How the hell are we supposed to get him out of here?" I asked. I tried my walkie-talkie, remembering Dean's story about how his had failed at the critical moment when he needed help. But this time, it worked. I heard the voice of a female ranger come through, and it sounded like an angel to me in that time of desperation. "Antonio Brown, the head ranger, is seriously injured," I said. "We need an immediate medical evac. We are on the Loggerhead Trail, right before it meets the Angel Trace mountain circuit." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry to tell you, but there is nowhere to land any sort of helicopter in that area," she said. "I think you already knew that, though. The best chance to get him out of there quickly is with an ATV with an attached trailer. But that's going to be a bumpy ride. Is he critically injured, do you think? Or—" "Look, I'm not a doctor," I said, "but he has blood all over him. He's missing an ear and a piece of his shoulder, and he has a massive scalp laceration. Allie doesn't seem to think he has any arteries severed, but she isn't exactly a doctor either. And what about everyone else? I've already called in the paramedics, they're on their way. Another ranger is setting up the ATV attachment with blankets for Antonio, so we can pull him out of there to safety. Are there any other injuries?" I looked at Allie, with her bleeding shoulder. I had a few scrapes and cuts on me, but considering the circumstances, I considered those nothing at all. Dean looked totally fine, as if he had just stepped out of the ranger's station to go on a moonlit stroll. Then I looked around, lowering the walkie-talkie suddenly. "Where's the new guy?" I asked loudly. They all turned to me, even Antonio. "We had 5 people. We had Roger, that young ranger, in the back. Where the hell is he?" Dean shrugged. "Maybe he ran off when the fighting started," he asked helpfully. "I mean, he didn't exactly sign up for this. I don't think most people would want to start a new job like this, to be honest." "No," Allie said, frowning. "He was next to me when the attack started. I saw him shooting. He had a 12-gauge Mossberg. It was so loud every time he fired it, my ears were ringing. And then—" She shook her head. "By the time that thing jumped on me, he wasn't here. Maybe he got dragged away. God, I hope not. I hope he just ran back to the station." "Calvin," the ranger asked on the other end of the walkie-talkie. "Did we lose you?" I raised it to my lips, hesitantly. "I'm not sure how to say this," I said, "but I think Roger may be gone. I don't even know if he is still alive. You should call the police and get some search helicopters going." I didn't add, however, that the chances of any helicopter finding him, alive or dead, were slim. If those creatures had dragged him off, we might find bones stripped of flesh. Or maybe, more likely, nothing at all. No. "This was a total shit show," I said, once we were back at the station. A Lifestar helicopter had taken Antonio and Allie to the hospital to be stitched up and given shots for rabies and infection. I didn't really know Roger, as he was always quiet and had just started a couple weeks ago, but I felt a sense of guilt for him as well. Dean came towards me, putting his hand on my shoulder. "We can't give up," he said. "Your wife may still be alive." I nodded, staring off through the window at the dark forest outside. "I'm going back," I said. "Tonight. I don't have time to waste. I'll take a different trail. If my wife is alive, then the way to find her is out there. I know it. I think it's at that cabin." "Aren't there police guarding the cabin?" he asked. I nodded. "So they say," I said bitterly. "I'm going." "I'll come with you," he said, looking determinedly at me. "Why in the world would you want to come with me? You realize I'll probably die, right?" He shrugged. "I'm not so sure of that," he said. "But maybe. Maybe. We could all die tonight, I guess. I'm still coming, though. And let's bring more guns this time." I nodded, smiling slightly. We went to the armory. I still had my 20-gauge shotgun and my backpack with slugs and shells inside. I also grabbed 2 pistols, a Ruger Super Red Hawk and a Smith & Wesson Model 500. Dean grabbed a Judge, a pistol that fires shotgun shells, and a .50 Action Express. We filled our packs with more ammo, strapping the pistols to our belts. It all felt extremely heavy to me, and I knew it would slow us down. But I didn't want to risk running out of bullets so fast this time. We also each grabbed a large Bowie knife, strapping the sheaths next to the pistols. I put a few bottles of water in my pack, giving a few to Dean, and threw in some peanut butter and crackers for good measure. I wasn't expecting to be out long after all. We set off, the night seeming darker than ever. Mostly, we walked in silence, listening to the chirping of bugs. My light illuminated an owl that flew down in the middle of the trail, looked at both of us with disdain, then flew off again. "You know, owls are omens in many cultures," Dayan said. "Omens of what?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "Depends, I guess. In Asia, sometimes they signify good fortune and luck, but the Native Americans and others often thought of them as omens of death or bad luck." "Great," I said, frowning. "Well, I don't believe in that crap anyways. I make my own luck." He laughed. "That's a good mindset," he said. "If only it were true." We got to the cabin in good time. Other than the owl, we saw nothing on the way. The forest seemed silent and sleeping, or perhaps just watching, wondering what we would do next. I saw the windowless cabin ahead, standing aloof in the silent, dark night. It looked eerie, the door standing open, as if beckoning us inside. Splatters of dark, dried blood still showed on the threshold and the front of the door, contrasting heavily with the white wood in the LED light. "Isn't there supposed to be police protection?" I asked, confused. "I thought they had a cop out here or something." "That's what they told me," Dean said, frowning. He raised his gun, walking forward slowly. "This is the park ranger, Dean," identifying myself, he yelled loudly. "Do not shoot, I repeat. We work for the park. Please respond if you can hear me." The echoes faded into the trees, but I heard nothing. I walked side with Dean, then started sprinting forwards towards the open door. Something was wrong, and I knew it. I peered inside and saw the body of a police officer, crucified against the wall. Large nails were driven through his wrists, drops of fresh blood falling quietly to the wooden floor below. His eyelids were missing, cut or bitten off, giving him a look of perpetual surprise and terror. He had been disemboweled, his intestines hanging down like the leaves of a weeping willow. And from behind us, I heard laughter. Turning around, I saw Roger, the new ranger, in a black robe and surrounded by dozens of the thin, emaciated creatures. He smiled, his boyish blue eyes turning cold and insane as he showed all his teeth. my friends, you have come back," he said. "Thank you for that. My creatures need to feed, and your bodies will make delicious meals for them."